If someone had told me that the love of my life would also be the person who would destroy everything I had built, I would have laughed. Because I was the kind of person who trusted. The kind of person who saw goodness even where there was none. The kind of person who would put both feet in the fire for someone who said, "I love you," with conviction in their eyes. But that day, that damned day, when I opened the envelope that came in the mail, with the deed to the house I had financed with every penny I had ever sweated, and saw her name there, and only her name, I understood. Too late, maybe, but I understood. My name is Amanda. I'm 36 years old. I'm an accountant. I'm extremely organized, and I've always been that person that others called down to earth. But when it comes to love, it seems like the ground disappears and we start floating in illusions. That's exactly what happened when I met Juliana. Juliana was everything I never imagined I deserved. Beautiful, outgoing, with a laugh that would turn any room into a centerpiece, and a confidence that bordered on arrogant. But that, to me, sounded like security. She worked in marketing, and we met at a company event where I was a consultant. At first, we had casual conversations. Then we had coffee after work. Soon, we were sharing a bed. And even sooner, sharing a life. "Amanda, I've never had anyone like you," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I feel like I've finally found a home." And ironically, it was precisely the home that she would take from me. At first, I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that it was paranoia, exaggeration, trauma from previous relationships, because I had been hurt before, and Juliana seemed different. She made me laugh. She made me feel desired. And most of all, she made me dream. And that's why, after 2 years of dating, I said yes when she suggested we buy a house together. "It's time to take the next step, Mandy. We already live like a married couple. How about a place of our own?" But "our" is a treacherous word, especially when used by someone who already has the whole plan planned behind a loving smile. The idea was simple. We would take out a loan in my name, because I had a higher rent, a clean credit record, and stability, and we would put the house in both of their names. Juliana claimed that the bureaucracy was easier that way, since the company where she worked had financing limitations. I trusted. I signed everything, without reading between the lines. On the paper, she said, we would only put her name on it, for now, for labor reasons. She assured me that later we would draw up a civil union contract and divide everything properly. And I believed her, because, in my mind, that was a gesture of love, not a war contract. There were months of renovations, furniture choices, sleepless nights planning every corner. I threw myself into that project like someone who bets everything on the last round of life. When the house was finished, it was like a dream painted in shades of white, light wood, and promises of eternity. But dreams can turn into nightmares, and mine started the moment I realized that Juliana was changing. She started arriving late, getting irritated over small things, avoiding physical contact, and finally, sleeping in another room, claiming stress from work. One night, coming back from the office early, I saw her expression in the rearview mirror of the car, parked in the garage. She was talking on the phone, smiling in a way she no longer smiled at me, and when she hung up, she ran to delete the call history. That hurt me, but I didn't know the worst yet. The worst would come weeks later, in a brown envelope with no return address. The deed to the house, the blessed deed. I opened it like someone opening a present. I thought maybe it was something she was preparing, a gesture of trust, but the contents knocked me off my feet. Cold, cool, irrefutable. Owner, Juliana Azevedo Mora. Only her. My eyes scanned each line as if they could find a mistake, a detail, something that told me it was a mistake. But it wasn't. The house was 100% in her name. The money came out of my account. The contract was in my name, but the ownership was hers. I felt my stomach turn. My world went silent. A silence filled with anger, disappointment, a kind of pain that doesn't bleed on the outside but tears on the inside. She fooled me. With charm, with time, with love. And I, stupid, believed it. But in that moment, when I felt everything that was mine slipping through my fingers, I didn't cry. I stopped. I took a breath. And I promised one thing. She took what was mine. Now it was my turn to take away what she loved most. That night, after staring at the deed, as one might stare at the verdict of an unjust sentence, I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed with the paper between my fingers, while the entire world seemed to collapse silently inside my chest. The house was empty. Juliana had left early to have dinner with a friend from work. Every time she said that, my skin crawled. It wasn't jealousy, it was intuition. And my intuition never failed. I just kept ignoring it. But now I had something concrete, Black and white words that told me, with documentary coldness, that the woman sleeping next to me was, in fact, building her own freedom on my good faith. Anger came after silence, and with it, lucidity. I copied the property registration number, entered the internal systems of the IRS and the City Hall, privileges of someone who is an accountant and knows the inside story of bureaucracy, and confirmed everything. The house was in her name, purchased entirely with deposits from my bank account, with my income tax declared as the source, but linked to her as the sole owner. In other words, the coup was planned from the beginning. I waited for Juliana to return. I sat on the couch with the deed on the coffee table. I turned off the lights, leaving only the lamp on. When she came in, it was almost 2 a.m. The perfume on her neck was not the same as usual. She froze when she saw me there. "Love, what are you doing up at this hour?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her and then at the paper. She followed my gaze. She saw the writing. The silence that fell there wasn't just tense. It was revealing. It was the first time I'd seen real fear in her eyes. Not guilt, fear. "Did you open it?" she asked, almost whispering. Of course I opened it, and I read it, in detail. "Do you want to explain to me why the house is only in your name?" Juliana took a while to answer. She walked slowly to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water, as if she were just pretending to be normal, and said with a half-smile, "Amanda, we already talked about this. It was because of my company's policy. Remember? I explained it to you. You explained to me that it would be temporary, that we would regularize it later, that there would be a contract. You promised." She drank the water, and then, out of nowhere, she said the phrase that stabbed me in the chest. "Oh, Mandy, you're so proper. It's just a house, just one house. The house for which I gave up vacations, weekends, comfort. The house for which I worked nights on end reviewing spreadsheets. The house I imagined growing old next to, decorating the children's room, celebrating Christmas." I didn't answer. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at her. That's when she realized something was different. "Okay, look," she continued, now with a calmer tone of voice, but with an uneasy look. "I can go to the registry office tomorrow. We can sort it out. Seriously, I don't want you to think I'm trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I love you." The "I love you." How her "I love you" sounded like a counterfeit coin now, an empty echo, a verbal trap. "You don't need to go to the notary's office," I replied. "I already went, and I already spoke to a lawyer too." She stopped. She swallowed hard. "Lawyer? Amanda, this is going too far. You're freaking out. It's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding you have harbored for 2 years." And then, she let go. The truth, the blow, the humiliation. "You know what? I was going to tell you," he said, as if this were redemption. "But I fell in love with someone else and, well, maybe it's best for each of us to move on. The house is already in my name. You don't have to worry about that anymore. I thought it would be easier if we broke up for good." With every word that came out of her mouth, I felt the ground opening up. She was right there, in front of me, telling me that there was someone else, that she was leaving, and that she was going to take the house with her too. "So that was the plan?" I asked, my voice steady but my heart in ruins. "You used me to fund your independence, and now you're just going to walk out that door like nothing happened?" Juliana took a deep breath. "Life is like that, Amanda. People change. Relationships end. And you should stop being so naive." She smiled. I swear to God she smiled. And then she left, without crying, without turning around. She just grabbed her bag, her cell phone, and said, "I'll come by tomorrow to get my things." That night, what died wasn't just our relationship. It was the version of me that believed in love as salvation, in commitment as protection, in words as value. But along with this death, something new was born. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was something colder, more lethal, will for justice, and not in court, but in a way she never expected. She thought she had won. Little did she know that the hardest part of knocking me down was watching me get up afterwards. She left that night without looking back, as if she were winning a dispute, as if she were mocking the one who was on her knees. Juliana took with her the house key, the false sense of control, and the conviction that I would not have the strength to react. And perhaps, for a time, she was right, because in the days that followed, I fell apart. I didn't cry in front of her, but I cried in the bathroom at work, with the door locked and my head between my knees. I cried hugging a pillow that still smelled like her. I cried when I went to the closet and realized that half the drawers were empty. The other half seemed to scream, "You've been made a fool of." My routine was ruined. I started making mistakes in my spreadsheets, something unthinkable for someone as methodical as me. I was late for meetings. I forgot deadlines. My boss, a cold and objective man, called me in for a talk. Amanda, if you need a few days, take it. But we need you here. You are our pillar. Oh, if he only knew that even pillars crack from the inside. I refused the days. I wanted to keep going, as if continuing to work was a way to maintain some structure. But I was just a shell of myself. My friends, the few who remained over the years, because Juliana made a point of saying that too much friendship was a waste of energy, tried to get closer. One of them, Marilia, came to visit me. Friend, what happened? You look like a shadow. And I told her. For the first time, I told her everything. The coup, the deed, the betrayal. I spoke between sobs, with my soul raw. And she didn't judge me. She just hugged me and said, "You have been the victim of an emotional and financial scam. This is not just a breakup. This is theft. This is abuse. And you will not leave it like this." That day, I slept at Marilia's house. The first night without waking up with a start. But when I got back to the apartment, or rather, the house that was still mine in terms of financing, but not on paper, I realized that the war would be longer than I thought. Juliana had returned, alone, but with some changes. The walls were painted a different color. The curtains were changed. The photos we had together were removed. In their place were new paintings, impersonal, expensive, soulless. And the worst part, a man in flip-flops and a tank top opened the door to my house when I rang the doorbell. "Are you Amanda?" he asked. "Yes. Who are you?" "Raphael, Jew's boyfriend. Already. As if the years by my side were recycled trash. "Is she?" I asked, my voice shaking with pent-up hatred. "He's in the shower. Do you want to come in?" I went in, not because of him, but because that was still my house. At least on paper. Juliana came down a few minutes later, with wet hair and a short robe. She looked at me like someone looking at an insect on the wall. "I thought it would be resolved through justice," he said, crossing his arms. "I'm still deciding how I'm going to deal with this," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Look, Amanda, I'm sorry, but I've already turned the page. You should do the same." She walked up to me and in a condescending tone added, "It will be better for you." Really, that destroyed me again, but in a different way. This time I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I didn't beg. This time I just memorize every word, every expression, every detail of the room, of Raphael, of the new painting above the sofa that I had chosen at a design fair. It was a crime scene, and there she was, showing off as if she were a winner. I left without saying anything else, but my mind was already buzzing, because behind the pain, something much stronger was beginning to grow. Clarity. I started listing everything I had paid for with my own money, from the down payment on the house to the renovations, furniture, appliances, and notary fees. I went through emails, receipts, and transfers. I put together a folder with documents. I consolidated evidence. Meanwhile, Juliana made a point of showing off her new life on social media. A brunch in the garden that I planned. A video of Raphael in the pool that I had built. A caption, "Starting a new chapter with someone who truly deserves it." That went viral among our acquaintances. And of course, many came to ask what happened. But I didn't give any explanation. Not because I was embarrassed, but because I had another plan. Juliana thought she had buried my dignity along with the love she killed. Little did she know that the only thing she buried was the passive version of me. The pain became fuel, and with it, I lit the match that would start something far more devastating than she could have anticipated. Because you can take everything away from someone, less the ability to rebuild, and even worse for her, to take revenge. Silence, when it comes after a fall, tastes like blood. But it also has a purpose. It is in silence that we hear the sound of our own footsteps regaining their foothold. That's how I started to resurface. Not in the cinematic way many expect, with aesthetic transformation, catchphrases, or a new passion as an emotional crutch. None of that. My resurgence began in silence, in the dark, with fingers shaking on the keyboard and eyes red from reading old contracts and emails. I had a very clear goal: to destroy Juliana, not just to expose what she had done to me, but to turn the table so precisely that she would be forced to watch helplessly as her castle crumbled, brick by brick. And for that, I would need two weapons: information, patience. I started with what I had at hand: my knowledge as an accountant. I knew how companies disguised expenses, how people hid assets, and how the IRS could be a minefield, as long as you knew where to step. Juliana never knew that. She thought my intelligence was limited to a calculator, but I was much more than numbers. I got in touch with an old acquaintance from law school, Dr. Eliseo, a cynical, brilliant lawyer who is completely oblivious to sentimentality. Amanda, this story of yours is classic. A marital assets scam disguised as a romance. But look, it's going to be hard to prove bad faith. You weren't officially married. There's no contract, nor a recognized stable union. But there is evidence, I replied, opening the folder I had organized as if it were a criminal complaint. Transfers, conversations, WhatsApp screenshots where she confirms the agreement to put the house in my name later. And there's more. All the payments came out of my account. Everything is traceable. He looked through it in silence. He flipped through it, muttered, frowned, and finally let out a small smile. Look, maybe it's not enough to get the house back, but you can pressure her. You can scare her. And with that, you can get other things. Money, her soul in tatters, or both. I want both. He laughed. Now, yes. I like clients with a purpose. Meanwhile, in parallel, I began an informal investigation into her new boyfriend, Raphael. All it took was a few searches on social media, cross-referencing names and CNPJs in public databases, and I discovered that he was a freelance marketing consultant. In other words, he was unemployed and lived off appearances. And what's more, Raphael had already been sued for fraud in another state. He reached a settlement. He paid bail. But he was a repeat offender. Juliana was, without knowing it, arm in arm with a man who could very well do to her what she did to me. Irony? No. Seed. I went back to social media. I started following anonymous profiles and observing her every move. Stories, posts, comments. I discovered who her new friends and coworkers were. I mapped out her schedule. What she did on Sundays, where she got her hair cut, who she drank wine with. I knew her better than she knew herself. And that was an asset she never imagined I had in store. But my plan would not be just legal, it would be psychological. It was necessary to turn the tables, make her feel that something was wrong, even without knowing what. That's when the first practical step came. I sent an anonymous email to the company where she worked, attaching documents, nothing confidential, just screenshots of public posts, photos at parties during weekdays, screenshots of her bragging about buying a house in her own name even without a stable income. And I signed as a market competitor uncomfortable with unethical practice. The email circulated. 2 weeks later, she was removed for conduct investigation. I found out because one of her colleagues, who had previously been my client, called me, without knowing that we had any connection. Did you see what happened to Juliana? Suspended. They say they're auditing everything. It seems like someone reported serious things. I feigned surprise. Seriously? What a thing, huh? Meanwhile, I started attending accounting and law events again. I got ready, studied new topics, and networked. I started closing deals with small businesses and startups that were growing. Soon, my account started to breathe again. It was still not much, but it was enough to take the next step. I hired an auditing firm to conduct a tax investigation into Juliana and Raphael's lives under the pretext of analyzing investment risk, using a partner company as a front. The idea was to uncover anything that could link them to fraud, debts, and legal issues, and it didn't take long. A call from the tax detective confirmed. Her boyfriend opened a MEI in the name of a third party. He has already moved more than 50,000 reais by issuing fake invoices. His CPF is linked to the account. Do you want the details? I want it all. And tell me one thing. Is that a crime? Yes, it is. And it can lead to jail time if it is reported the right way. My heart pounded. Not out of fear, out of relief. Because now I had more than the beginnings of a plan. I had weapons in my hands. Juliana didn't know it yet. She was still posting selfies in my pool, toasting with white wine, laughing out loud in videos with Raphael, with no idea that the clock to her own ruin was already counting down. And when the first minute was up, she wouldn't even have anywhere to run. The first notification arrived in her inbox on a normal Wednesday morning. A registered email, with a legal copy, requesting clarification on the financial and tax ties involved in the purchase of the house located on Rua Engenheiro Costa, a property financed exclusively by me, but registered in her name. Subject: conflict of possession and financial responsibility, property in dispute. Juliana read it, and inside, she must have frozen. Because it wasn't just an emotional charge. It was a legal document, signed by a respected law firm, the same one she knew that served million-dollar companies, and now, it was against her. It took about 3 hours for my phone to vibrate. Juliana. I hesitated for 2 seconds, took a deep breath, and answered. Hello? The silence on the other end was the kind of silence that oozes despair. Amanda. What is that you sent? My voice came out calmer than I expected. It's an extrajudicial notification, the first of many, in fact. I'm just formalizing what's being investigated. Misappropriation of property financed by third parties, and possible collusion with a person under investigation for tax fraud. She stuttered. For the first time, she stuttered. Is this serious? Are you really going to expose me like this? Hey, I thought you were so confident, Jew. Didn't you say it was just a house? That I should stop being naive? Amanda, for the love of God, this could end me. Now, do you care about consequences? Break. Can we talk? In person? I don't think so. Now I'll only go through my lawyers. I hung up, and in that moment, I knew she was shaking inside. The woman who had so haughtily told me that she had already moved on was now calling me on the verge of a breakdown. But that was just the beginning. In the following weeks, the movements intensified. The state public prosecutor's office received a formal complaint, written in a technical and impersonal manner, about suspicious transactions by Juliana and Raphael. The complaint was not anonymous. I used a CNPJ of a friendly company as an intermediary. They knew they had an obligation to investigate. The company where she worked, pressured by previous emails and new tax documents that were leaked, decided to terminate her employment relationship before the end of her period of absence. Juliana was fired for breach of ethical conduct. I notified the bank responsible for financing the house. Since the debt was in my name, I requested a re-examination of the ownership and the possible cancellation of the transfer to Juliana's account, alleging fraud and misuse. This resulted in an internal audit and, as a side effect, the freezing of the mortgage payment account for an indefinite period. The result? Juliana lost her job, had her payment account frozen, and started receiving charges from the bank. But that wasn't what brought her down. It was the rift between her and Raphael. I found out, through a message sent by a friend who had infiltrated her social networks, that their relationship fell apart when Juliana started being called to testify. Raphael, the crook who seemed enchanted by her, disappeared. Literally. He disappeared off the map. He changed his number. He sold his car in someone else's name. And, from what I heard, he fled to another state. Juliana, now alone, unemployed, under investigation, and living in a house she couldn't even afford, sent me a message, short, desperate. Please, we need to talk. I was wrong, but you're destroying my life. You might think I felt something. Pity, perhaps. But no. I didn't feel anything, because there was no repentance there. There was fear. And fear in the world she'd thrown me into was the only currency she deserved to taste. That night I went to the house. Yes, the house that was still registered in her name, but financed with my money. I rang the doorbell. She opened it. Her face was haggard, her eyes sunken, no makeup, her hair tied up in a mess. A sweatshirt I recognized. It was mine. Amanda, he said, almost without a voice. I looked around. Furniture covered in sheets, electronics boxes empty, dust accumulated in the corners. She was losing everything. I came to tell you something, I said firmly. She just nodded, looking at me like a convict looks at the judge before sentencing. This is just the beginning. I turned my back and walked away. The wind that night cut my face like a razor. But inside me, there was only calm. A lethal calm. Juliana thought she hurt me. Little did she know that she had woken me up. And now, she would live what I had lived. Not for a week, not for a month, but until every last penny, every last crumb of dignity she thought she had bought with charm, was returned in pain. People often say that revenge is like poison. It destroys those who carry it. But they have never met anyone like Juliana. They have never seen up close what it is like to be betrayed with a smile on your face and a knife in your back. What I carried was not poison. It was justice packaged with strategy. It was the coldness that pain taught me to cultivate, drop by drop, until I became more lethal than any court. And it was exactly at this stage that everything began to come to light. Publicly. The case, which until then had been a silent trial, made local headlines when an investigative journalist specializing in tax fraud received an anonymous tip, with all the paperwork that my lawyer and I had gathered over the past few months. The title of the article was straightforward. Businesswoman investigated for asset fraud and use of front man in property financing. The photo was of her smiling at a party, with Raphael in the background. The text didn't mention my name, of course, but anyone who knew her social circle knew exactly who it was. The news spread like wildfire. In a few days, friends drifted apart. Her mother stopped attending to her. Brands she promoted on social media withdrew sponsorship. And the best part, Raphael's creditors started looking for her. People he had conned in other cities, now thinking she was involved in the schemes. She received threats via text messages. One of them even showed up at the gate of the house, yes, my house, shouting that he wanted his money back. Juliana went to the police station. She tried to file a report, but the authorities were already too busy investigating her. They told me that she started sleeping with a knife in her bedside drawer, that she kept looking over her shoulder, that she stopped going to restaurants and social events, that she started losing weight and having panic attacks. But none of this surprised me. She wanted to play dirty. I played better. Because while she was falling apart in public, I was growing in silence. I signed a contract with a digital auditing startup and began to be invited to give lectures on accounting ethics and legal security. The irony made me smile. I, who had been the victim of a scam, was now teaching others how to avoid fraud. And Juliana was the living example of what happens when you play with the trust of someone who doesn't forget. Then I received an email from her, a desperate request for an amicable settlement. Amanda, please. I can't take it anymore. You've already gotten what you wanted. I've lost everything. Let's settle this without court, without any more headlines. I'll sign whatever you want. Just stop. Did she want peace? After turning my home into a battlefield? I replied with just one sentence. Now you know what it's like to live in a place that feels like yours, but belongs to someone else. But what really buried Juliana was what came next. She tried to sell the house. Yes, even with the case underway, with the investigation going on, with payments frozen, she thought she could transfer the property and walk away with some money in her pocket. Greed is always the final mistake of the arrogant, but the buyer was an undercover broker, hired by me. He scheduled a visit, feigned interest, brought false documents to move forward with the purchase, and when Juliana signed the proposal papers, he recorded everything. In the recording, she said, "This property is 100% mine. It was financed by someone else, but everything is in my name. There's no way it could go wrong." The video was forwarded to the public prosecutor's office. Now, she was no longer under investigation. She was formally charged. What was once just a civil lawsuit has now become a criminal action. Misappropriation of funds, ideological falsehood, attempt to conceal assets, and, the cherry on top, possible collusion with a fugitive fraudster. Juliana was summoned to testify. Her bank secrecy was broken, her assets were frozen, and, on a cold Monday morning, her name was printed in a statewide newspaper. A friend of mine from the past, who coincidentally worked at this newspaper, sent me the image of the cover, ex-influencer accused of involvement in real estate fraud. She was unrecognizable in the photo, blank stare, slumped shoulders. And do you know what she did that day? He called me, crying, begging, "Amanda, please, I can't take it anymore. I was an idiot. I lost myself. I betrayed you, yes, but you destroyed me. You did it. Look what you did to me." I took a deep breath. I allowed myself silence. I wanted her to hear my wordless contempt. "Amanda, are you there?" "Yes, just listening to you fall apart," I replied. "Curious. I thought you were stronger. Please, say you'll stop. I stopped being your victim. That's all." And I hung up. That day, I went for a walk. For the first time in a long time, I breathed without a lump in my throat. Juliana was reaping what she sowed. What about me? I was just beginning to water what would come next. I always knew that my revenge would not be complete while she still had a shred of pride to cling to, while there was still someone who doubted my version, while there was a single remnant of the image that Juliana cultivated, of a successful, free, independent woman. I would not rest. And that's why I decided to take the outcome to where she valued it most, the social stage. Juliana was still part of a group of former students from a famous private school in the city, an elitist group full of philanthropy that held charity events with champagne and the presence of local high society. It was the last bubble in which she pretended to be someone, and I knew that there would be a big event that month, the association's traditional annual dinner, with tickets sold to local businesses, politicians, and entrepreneurs. She was on the list of honorary coordinators, even in the midst of the scandal, because she still had influential friends who thought it was all a legal misunderstanding. Until that moment, because it was there, that night, that everything changed. I got an invitation, discreetly. I paid for it under another name. I dressed up carefully, hair tied up, elegant black dress, sober makeup. I arrived at the event like a silent shadow, walking among crystal glasses and fake smiles. Juliana was there. She looked tired, but she was trying to keep her composure. She was wearing a light, low-cut dress and had a wide smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was talking to two older women and a man in a gray blazer, probably a sponsor. She hasn't seen me, yet, but seeing her there confirmed what I already knew. She was trying to save herself by looking good, to pretend nothing had happened, And at that moment, I did what I had been planning for weeks. I flagged down a waiter, a young man who had worked with me years ago and who was now working the buffet for the event. I handed him a white envelope embossed with the event's initials. Inside was copies of the house deed, prints of conversations with Juliana admitting that she used my money, official document from the public prosecutor's office with her name as the defendant, a copy of the proposed illegal sale of the property, and finally, a letter signed by me, narrating the facts in a clear and objective way, with an impersonal, almost journalistic tone. I delivered everything with a single request. When she comes up to speak, hand this to the presenter. And so it was. The event continued, with music in the background and empty laughter. Then, at 9 p.m., Juliana was called to the stage to thank those present and announce the night's fundraising. She came up with the pose of a first lady, delicately holding the microphone. The light was on her. The room was silent. She began to speak. False sweet words, as always. We are very happy to contribute once again to such important projects. I thank everyone present, and it was then that the master of ceremonies politely approached him and handed him the envelope. On the microphone, one could still hear, "Ah, a statement?" She opened it. She read it. And what happened there was the exact moment her world fell apart in front of everyone. The smile faded. Her eyes widened. Her fingers began to tremble. She tried to hide it, coughed, took a step back, but she couldn't. The contents of the envelope fell to the floor. The paper with her name as the defendant under investigation slipped and became visible to the audience. A photographer clicked. Another one too. Murmurs filled the hall. Juliana tried to leave the stage, but tripped on her heels. She almost fell. Someone laughed. Someone else stood up. Confusion ensued. I just stood in the background, watching like a theater-goer watches the final scene of the play, the one where the villain finally pays for everything. She left the stage supported by one of the organizers. She went straight to the bathroom where, according to sources who later told me, she had a panic attack. She vomited. She fainted. She was taken home early. And the next day, her image was in every social group in the city. The screenshots were circulated. The PDF of the complaint was spread. The mask fell for good. Some tried to defend her, saying it was all a setup, but the amount of evidence was so absurd, so organized, that there was no room for doubt. I have been called vindictive by some, but interestingly, I have also received private messages from women who said, "You did what we all dreamed of one day. Thank you for showing us that we are not weak. She deceived me too, and I didn't have the courage to fight back." Juliana, the woman who once called me naive and pathetic, was now synonymous with fraud. She lost her last social connection. She was removed from the group of former students. Her accounts were closed. The bank notified her of default. The public prosecutor's office made the complaint official. And me? I slept peacefully, with a light smile, knowing that this time I went on stage, even if no one saw me. Juliana's fall was ugly, but it was fair. After the scandal at the event, everything fell apart. It was as if the last pillars supporting that carefully constructed facade had been ripped out at once, leaving only rubble. She disappeared from social media the next day, which, for her, was the equivalent of disappearing from the map. She canceled accounts, blocked old friends, and refused to contact anyone. Her closest friends, who had previously been glued to her like an army of sycophants, now said, "I didn't know she was like that," as if that exempted them from complicity. But the final blow was yet to come, and it would not come from the networks, nor from the press. It would come from the justice system. The public prosecutor's office finalized the complaint and instituted formal criminal proceedings. She was called to testify, this time as a defendant prosecuted for asset fraud, misappropriation of funds, and attempted concealment of assets. The civil lawsuit that we had filed in parallel, requesting that the property be returned to my name based on the recorded payments and evidence of bad faith in the contract, began to move forward at a rapid pace. Even the judge, faced with the abundance of evidence, had no choice but to order the temporary suspension of possession of the house until a final decision was made. Juliana had to leave, evicted. Yes, you read that right. The woman who, months earlier, had boasted about owning a dream home bought independently, was now leaving the place with cardboard boxes, clothes hastily stuffed into suitcases on wheels, and, according to the bailiff who witnessed the whole thing, in tears. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be, but I saw the photos of the process. And I confess, no matter how much I tried to be cold, that image moved me. She looked small, not physically, but humiliated. She had that look of someone who doesn't understand how she got there, but I knew exactly how. She got there lying, cheating, using. It It was only a matter of time before the world caught up. The house with a restraining order was returned to my legal possession under a litigation clause. That is, I could not sell it yet, but I could occupy it. And so I did. I came back. But not like before. I walked in with firm steps, alone. I took only what was necessary. My documents, my computer, a new bed. The rest, I had them removed. Every piece of furniture that reminded me of her. Every inch of the house that had been chosen in the name of an us that never existed. I painted the walls. I tore down the curtains. I replaced the kitchen floor. And most of all, I redid the entire master bedroom. As if, by reconstructing this space, I was also reconstructing who I was. Juliana tried one last resort. She sent a handwritten letter asking for a final meeting, saying she wanted to apologize, tell her side of the story, try to save what was left. She said she was sick, suffering from anxiety attacks, and that she didn't want to be arrested. But this time, I didn't go, because what she wanted wasn't repentance. It was priceless forgiveness, and that kind of forgiveness she didn't deserve. The trial continued. Raphael was never found, although he was named as an accomplice. Investigations showed that the two had indeed tried to hide assets in the name of third parties, and although the judge did not impose a prison sentence, she was ordered to pay compensation for moral and material damages. And what's more, his name was tarnished. His passport was withheld. His accounts and assets were frozen. He was officially declared dirty in the public domain. In practice, she could no longer open a company. She could not finance anything. She could not even rent a property without presenting a double deposit. He went to live with a distant aunt. No internet, no luxury, no Raphael, no audience. I, on the other hand, followed. Not as someone avenged, but as someone liberated. I recovered lost contracts. I went back to speaking. I invested in myself. I even traveled alone, for the first time, to the south of Chile. I woke up early. I walked without looking back. The house? I stayed there for a few months, until I decided to sell it. I made sure to donate part of the profits to a project that supports women who have suffered financial abuse in relationships. Yes, I rewrote the story with a different ending. Not the one they gave me, but the one I chose. Because in the end, the greatest revenge wasn't taking her off the stage. It was taking control of my narrative. Back. Entirely. Today, I write these words with a kind of serenity that, for a long time, I thought I would never feel again. They are no longer born of anger. They no longer flow as an outburst. They come from a much deeper place, a place where pain has turned into strength, where humiliation has turned into learning, where revenge has finally given way to freedom. Yes, I won. But most importantly, I became my own boss again. Juliana was just the cruelest side of a lesson that life had been trying to teach me for years, about limits, about self-love, about recognizing the difference between care and control. She was just the final push that forced me to look inside, where I had been putting everything that was valuable in other people's hands. After selling the house, I moved to a smaller apartment, high up in a sunny building, overlooking the park where I used to walk on forgetful Sundays. I made sure to furnish every corner with things that represented my new phase. No recycled furniture, no borrowed memories, just me. For me, for me. I started writing, short texts, diaries, memoirs, until a local publisher read one of these texts that I discreetly published on a blog and contacted me. Today, I am finishing my first book about patrimonial violence in romantic relationships, a topic that is ignored, hidden, and that so many people live without even realizing it. I receive dozens of messages a week. Women, and even some men, say that they woke up after reading my story, that they identified signs, that they are leaving toxic relationships, reorganizing their finances, rebuilding their lives. Some tell me, "You said something I never had the courage to say." That has been my biggest reparation. As for Juliana, I never saw her again. I heard rumors that she moved to another city, that she now lives discreetly, without social media, without friends around. Some say she is undergoing treatment. Others say she has become religious. But honestly, I don't care, because her story ends where mine begins. I learned through all of this that not all pain needs to harden us. That true revenge is not the suffering of another person. It is the reconstruction of our world without that person. It is when we truly smile again, walk with our heads held high, look in the mirror and think, "You went through hell and came out whole." Not intact, of course. The scars are there, some visible, others not so much. But they all tell a story that belongs to me, that can no longer be erased, distorted, or hijacked by anyone. Today, I allow myself to love again, more calmly, with more judgment, with more truth, but above all, without ever forgetting who I am. And if you're reading this and wondering if it's worth fighting back, if it's worth fighting back, if it's worth getting up after someone rips everything from you, I tell you with the strongest voice I have, it's worth it. It's worth every tear, every silence, every slow step, every choice to prioritize yourself. Because in the end, it's not about who destroyed you, it's about who you become. After you survive,